Okay, everyone. We're now studying together what I call the roots of roots, Hasidic sources of passionate pluralism. For me, these are some of the spiritual sources, the Jewish sources that provide the foundation for an understanding of how one can be passionately connected to, believe in, support their own worldview, their own way of life, at the same time be deeply, deeply open to listening to respecting, to legitimizing, and even learning from and absorbing the worldviews of others that may be very, very, very different than what you believe in and what you know. So what we're going to do is look at sources that are Hasidic sources. That means from the Jewish pietistic movement. The sources that we're going to see are from Eastern Europe, from Poland. The first few sources are from a Hasidic thinker whose name is Rabbi Mordechai Liner. He lived in a town in Poland called Izbich. That's why he's called the Izbicher, from Izbich. And the book of his writings is called the Mei Shiloach, the Flowing Waters. It's not a book that he wrote. It's a book that is a record of things he said orally. It was written down by his grandson. Most probably the Izbicher, Rabbi Mordechai Liner, spoke the words that we're about to read on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, around a table, a Shabbat table, the third meal most probably at the end of Shabbat on Saturday afternoon or evening. And the words were recorded by his grandson, either immediately afterwards or a little while afterwards. The words were spoken in a combination of Yiddish and Hebrew. They're recorded in you could say a broken Hebrew. And there are probably not more than 20 or 30 people listening to him in any given Shabbat. He wasn't a very popular thinker, but in the past few decades, he's become more and more popular, more and more relevant, you can say. So he speaks about the weekly Torah portion, what we read in synagogue every week, every Sabbath. He takes a particular verse from the Torah portion and expounds upon it, but he's really not telling us what the verse means. He's using the verse as a kind of foundation to say whatever he wants, just kind of to found it, give it context and give it authority. But he's very clearly speaking what's on his mind, things that again have little connection to the actual verse under discussion. So again, this is Rabbi Mordechai Liner in a book called the Mei Shiloach, the Flowing Waters. We're going to read in English. This is my translation. There is an English translation available, but I always say don't buy it, because it's not very good, it's not very clear, it will only confuse you more. The Hebrew is hard enough. The English is even harder and more confusing. So we're gonna learn a piece that comes from the first volume of the work on Parshat Yitro, which means the Torah portion that deals with the giving of the 10 Commandments in the book of Exodus. You have the sources in front of you. I have to give you some background about what we're gonna see right now. So he's talking about, our author is talking about the 10 Commandments. But he's not talking about all the 10 Commandments. He's talking about part of the 10 Commandments, the first commandment. And he's not just talking about the first commandment. He's talking about part of the first commandment, a small part, actually only one word of it, the first word, which is I. And he's even not talking about the whole first word, just about one letter in that first word. And that one letter is going to provide the foundation for everything we're going to do in this Zoom room for the next hour and 15 minutes. So now we're about to begin. The first commandment of the 10 Commandments is, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. I'm the Lord of God, you brought you out of the land of Egypt. In Hebrew, it begins, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm the Lord your God. Now the first word, that's the focus, as I said, is Anochi, which means I. But the thing is, that the word Anochi, I, is only one of two words that are used in the Torah interchangeably to mean I. There's another word, which is Ani. There's two words, Ani and Anochi. And in the 10 Commandments, as we said, the word that's used is Anochi. Now you can hear that the word Anochi is a little bit longer than the word Ani. And the truth is that it's one letter longer. The word Ani has 3 Hebrew letters, and the word Anochi has 4 Hebrew letters. And 3 of the 4 Hebrew letters are as the same letters as in the word ani. In other words, the word anochi is the same as the word ani, but has 1 extra letter. And that 1 extra letter is the Hebrew letter chaf. Another thing you have to know is that the letter chaf in Hebrew appears not only as part of words, it also can be a separate word. The letter chaf can be a separate word. It appears as a prefix to other words, and when the letter chaf appears as a prefix to other words, it means almost, kind of, more or less, just about, approximately. So now think that we have here the 10 Commandments, beginning with the word Anochi, which has that extra letter chaf, and we know in the back of our mind that that extra letter chaf, in other contexts, when it appears as a prefix and not as part of the word, means approximately, almost, kind of. With that background, we can now read the first paragraph of what our author is saying about the 10 Commandments. So I'm going to read from the sources that everyone has. And I guess I will move the screen here a little bit so you can see more of the source. The first paragraph reads as follows. I, Anochi, am the Lord your God. That's a quote from Exodus. It does not say Ani, for had it said Ani, it would have implied that the Holy One, blessed be He, had revealed the totality of His light to Israel, thereby precluding the possibility of delving deeper and deeper into His words, for all would have been already revealed. But the letter Chaf teaches that the revelation is not complete, and it is only a shadow and an approximation of the light that the Holy One, blessed be He, will reveal in the future. I don't expect that you understood what we just read, even though it's in English. It's a little bit cryptic, so we're going to explain. Clearly, he's taking the letter Chaf in the word Anochi, the first word of the 10 Commandments, and reading it as if it was a prefix. He's changed the order of the letters, Anochi, as if it read Ke Ani, as if there was a Chaf as a prefix, and then the word Ani, I. He's reading it, therefore, as if it says almost I, or kind of I, or more or less I. In other words, here, in the greatest revelation of human history as far as Judaism is concerned, our author is reading as if God reveals Himself and says, it's almost me. It's kind of me. It's more or less me. And that, of course, is in contrast to the way we would have normally read it, which is that God says, here I am, I. Not kind of or almost. Now, what I want to do is a pantomime for the next minute. Don't worry, no one's going to be put on the spot. It's only me. When I'm teaching in a room and not by Zoom, I do the pantomime by going out of the room and then coming in and playing God. And I play God in 2 different fashions. I play God as if I was giving the 10 Commandments in the way that our author says they were given, kind of, almost, more or less. And then I do a second pantomime, which actually I might do first right now, in which I come and give the 10 Commandments in the way that our author says they weren't given, as if they were given directly by God without the almost, kind of, approximately. So I'm going to now go, and you can't see me, and I'm going to come and give the 10 Commandments as they weren't given, according to our author, the way they weren't given. Here I am, the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God. Bask in my presence. Be illuminated by my radiance. Absorb all the wisdom. Know all the truth of divinity. That's what didn't happen. But if I go out of the room now and I give the 10 Commandments the way our author says they were given, it's like this. That's all, just a glimpse. Just a glimpse, just a little bit. And with the things I just said, I want to go back and read what our author says, just like I read 5 minutes ago, reading it again. I Anochi, I'm the Lord your God. It does not say Ani, for had it written Ani, it would have implied that the Holy One, blessed be He, had revealed the totality of His light to Israel, thereby precluding the possibility of delving deeper and deeper into His words, for all would have been already revealed. But the Letter Chav teaches that the revelation is not complete. And it's only a shadow and approximation of the light that the Holy One, blessed be He, will reveal in the future. So our author is saying that God, as it were, consciously and purposely decided not to reveal all His truth, not to reveal all Himself, all His wisdom, but only to reveal a little bit of it, as if there's revelation, but not fully. And the reason, according to author, that God decided not to take the opportunity to give the Jewish people and give the world all His truth was because of what's written here in the third line in what I just read, because had it been like that, had it been a full revelation, it would have precluded the possibility of delving deeper and deeper into His words. Because we understand, if you have all the truth, you can't look for it, you have it already. And according to our author, apparently, for God, it was more important to give us the possibility of delving deeper into deeper than to give us the answers on a silver platter. What I learned from this, and now I'm going into my own commentary, my own understanding, that we have here a Hasidic author, a Jewish rabbi 200 years ago approximately, who's telling us that on his understanding of Judaism, it's more important to search for the truth than to have the truth. That God, given a choice, would rather provide us with signposts towards the truth than the whole truth itself. He'd rather have human beings searching and journeying and questioning than have them knowing. According to this interpretation, we should understand the Ten Commandments, we should understand the Torah, we should understand Judaism more than a compendium of truth. We should understand it as a signpost, as a framework for inquiry, as a kick in the pants that says, that away, now go forth on your journey. For this author, the delving, the searching, the questioning, the asking is apparently the ultimate value of Judaism. That's what God did in the Revelation. According to this author, He gave us the directive to go search, to go think, to go experiment, to go look, to go on a journey. And now to another level of my commentary. In order to go on a journey of looking for truth, I would say you need at least two things. You need not to have the truth. If you have it, you can't look for it. And number two, you have to know that you don't know the truth. Because if you don't have the truth, but you think you do, you also won't go on a journey. So you have to not have the truth, and you have to know that you don't have the truth. Another way of saying that you have to know that you don't have the truth is you have to have humility. In order for there to be a spiritual search, there has to be the humility of knowing that I don't know and that I have the responsibility to search out sources of truth, sources of inspiration, and learn from them. So that's a beginning. If anyone would like to ask a question at this point, that's good. Let's see if anyone's interested in speaking up. You can unmute yourselves, I think.
Well,
yeah. Does somebody else want to speak first?
No, go on.
Oh, it's interesting, especially if we connect this to pluralism in a way, because it reminds me very much of Rav Kook, Lahavdil, in spite of his his subsequent acolytes. I remember reading that he once said that the truth is in the middle, and you draw a circle around it, and everyone, including other religions, whatever, sees that truth from a different vantage point. So that in a way, it resonates with this, that what we might have is an incomplete view of the truth, that we need to keep searching, and even more so, keep searching by understanding how others see that truth.
I can only agree with you.
Well, it's Rav Kook. I don't want to take, it's my interpretation of Rav Kook.
How does this go along? You know, I understand how it would go along with, you know, diversity and all of that, but with the idea that everything was at Sinai, both the written and the oral Torah, and it was all given at that time as part of our tradition.
Well, my understanding is that one way of understanding those Talmudic sources that say everything was given at Sinai is to understand that everything was given in potential at Sinai. In other words, everything that you discover in the Torah, everything that even the last student in the last row in the last generation will discover in the Torah, when in some sense was already there. Not in any mystical sense, but just in the sense that a text contains within it, in a metaphorical sense, all the interpretations that human beings can find there. And indeed, our author says later on in a piece we're not going to see, it's in your source sheet, but we're not going to see it, that indeed everything is there. We have to search for it. And from my understanding, when we say everything is there, what we mean to do, what the tradition means to do, is to say that whatever you discover in the Torah has the authority of Torah. When I say you, I'm pointing at everyone on the screen. If you know the tradition and you're part of the tradition, you see yourselves as part of the tradition, and you legitimately search for something and you find it in the Torah, then that has the gushpanka, the seal of approval of revelation. That's my understanding. Because again, the Torah is a signpost, or the Torah is a gold mine, and you will you'll find gold there if you search. But only
this sounds to me very different from the Christian view that our obligation is to find God. You're saying that our obligation is to spend our life searching for God.
There's a lot here that I can't unpack, but I will say that the Mei Shiloach, our author, says in at least one place that if you ever believe, no, let me say it differently, theoretically, if you found the whole truth, there'd be no reason to be alive anymore, there'd no reason to live, and there'd be no meaning to life. So indeed, finding the truth in a certain sense is not for this world. Finding the fullness of truth is not for this world. We're about to see that actually in another few minutes, that it's all about the search more than the finding.
Yeah, that part rings true with me. And I remember a phrase that somebody, I forget who to attribute it to now, said, run with people who search for truth, run away from people who have found it.
That's good. I like that.
I like it a lot. It helps put things in perspective.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go on. Is that okay to go on? Yeah. Okay, so the next paragraph here, it's on your screen, it says, to the degree that a man, or a woman of course, attains greater depth in Torah, he or she realizes that until now he was in darkness. This is hinted at by the existence of day and night. Day, that is, that God, may he be blessed, opens the gates of wisdom for a man. And night, that is, that a man should not presume that he has attained completely all there is to know. For all that he has attained is like night compared to the day that is yet to come. I'll stop there. So our author sees in the structure of the 24-hour period in which we live, sees a cosmic hint to larger meaning. The fact that there's day and night and day and night and day and night is the way we're supposed to live. We're supposed to try and live in day, which means to find illumination, as we've been talking. But we're supposed to, hopefully, realize at the end of every day that the day that we experienced today was really night. And how does that happen? Because you learn more the next day, and then you realize that things you thought yesterday were only partially true. They were not the fullness of truth. They were really night compared to the day that followed. So there's a process, there's a journey, there's a development. And it's about having confidence in what you found and then losing that confidence as you learn more, as a constant process. And I said the word constant, so at the end of the sentence I was reading, I left out 3 words. Now I'll read them. And so forever. And so forever. In other words, it's not supposed to end. Responding to Morris of a few minutes ago, Morris Fried, it's not that we're expecting at a certain point to get there. No, we're expecting to keep searching, which means even the last day of your life. At the highest level of illumination in philosophy, it's just tentative. It's just a human effort to encapsulate, to capture part of the truth, part of reality.
Hanan, we can only see the top of your screen.
You can only see the top of my screen.
Yeah, and I can't see you on the camera. I don't know if other people can.
I have the same issue. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Oh, thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
Does anyone not have the text?
We have the text, but we can only see the first 3 sentences of the text.
So I'm
I
saying
only
if
see
you,
the
have,
top
if
of
you
the
already
screen.
have the text, we don't need the screen share, is all I'm trying to say.
I'll resend the Google Doc now in the chat. But yeah, Hanan, we can only see the top of the
You
screen.
can only see the top. Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is if everybody has access to the text, we don't need the screen share.
Yeah. I do not have access.
I just posted it on the chat.
So Rachel just posted on the chat.
You just have to
Oh, okay.
scroll down, Reb.
Yeah, he's trying to.
Yeah. So whatever. I'm sorry, technically I did something wrong this time and I don't know what yet. I'm going to read the last line of the second paragraph. And therefore all is like night compared to the light that the Holy One, blessed be He, will reveal in the future. There's always a process, like we said. And everything, every day, is like night when we discover more and more and look back. Okay. I'm now going.
Rabbi,
Yes.
there's also an echo here of what we say at the Barchu, Yotzer Or Ubore Choshech, which is kind of the reverse of what we typically think of. And that notion of night is almost created for the possibility of us searching further.
Got it. Thank you. This is the third paragraph for those who have the sources. And this is why we find juxtaposed to this verse, the verse that says, do not fashion for yourself an idol. So we've now been talking about the first verse of the 10 Commandments, the first commandment, I'm the Lord your God. Our author points out that the second verse, the second commandment is do not fashion for yourself an idol. And the word for idol used in the second of the 10 commandments is pesel. For those who know Hebrew, pei samech lamed. Our author goes on to say, it is written in the Holy Zohar, the foundational work of Jewish mysticism, because it is written shizel, for yourself, 2 tablets like the first ones, therefore it is written, do not fashion for yourself an idol. That makes no sense.
Yeah.
Very difficult thing we have to explain. So he's pointing out that there are 2 words here. One is a noun, one is a verb that have the same root. The noun is idol, pesel, And the verb is chisel, like with a hammer and chisel, psol. Psol and pesel are the same root. One is a noun, one is a verb. And it's clear why. When you chisel, right, you're making something. The thing you make is a pesel, and the activity is psol, is making it, is chiseling it. So now what is our author saying? He's saying, look, after the giving the 10 Commandments, some of us know the story that the Jewish people sinned in the golden calf. God got angry. 120 days of Moses trying to ask for forgiveness. Finally, end of 120 days, God gives in, he relents, he forgives, and he says to Moses, make 2 new tablets. And what God says to Moses is, chisel for yourself 2 new tablets. So now our author feels he's come up with a conundrum. He's faced with an inner tension, a paradox, that the same word that's used in the 2nd commandment, don't make an idol. An idol is a terrible thing, a pesel, it's forbidden. That same word, pesel, is used later to describe the greatest thing in the world, to make the 2nd tablets. How could it be the same word is used for the worst thing in the world, for an idol, and for the best thing in the world, the tablets of the 10 Commandments are written on? Our author says, I don't understand how this could be. And he finds the answer in a hint in the Holy Zohar, the book of Jewish mysticism. And he explains as follows. Again, it's not clear yet, I understand. He explains, the explanation for the matter is that the word idol, pesel, is something chiseled and cut to exact size, exactly as intended, lacking nothing. What he's saying is that the same word is used for the worst thing and the best thing, because there's a connection between the best thing and the worst thing. And the connection between the best thing and the worst thing, between the Holy Torah and an idol, the connection is that you're always liable to turn the Holy Torah into an idol. What's an idol? It's something chiseled to form. It's something with clear boundaries. It's something that doesn't change. It's something that's static. When you relate to your Torah, our Torah, the Torah, as if it's an idol, in other words, as if it's unchanging, if it has boundaries, if it's clear, that's when you've turned the Torah into an idol. What he's saying is, to say the same thing in different words, is that the 1st commandment of the 10 Commandments says, I'm kind to the Lord your God. I'm amorphous. My truth is unclear. Go on a journey and search for the truth. The 2nd commandment says, don't turn the truth that you found into an idol. Don't build for yourself an idol. For our author means don't turn the Torah that you've discovered and you've learned and you've been taught by your teachers, don't turn into an idol. Don't turn it to something that's absolute, that has boundaries, that's clear, that's hard and fast, that's chiseled in stone. We have that word, that expression in English. Don't turn it into something chiseled in stone. Another way of saying the same thing is that the 2nd commandment is telling you, don't forget the letter Chaf in the 1st commandment. Don't turn the 1st commandment that here's my almost kind of approximate truth. Don't forget the Chaf that makes that approximation. Don't act as if it's the full and complete and absolute unchanging truth. The 2nd commandment is telling you, don't misread the 1st commandment. Yeah. So he says in the last line that I didn't read yet, the last line of the 3rd paragraph, but there's no such thing. There's no such thing as a truth that's lacking nothing. There's no such thing as a truth that is cut and chiseled exactly to size. There's no such thing except for the Torah of Moshe, our teacher, peace be upon us. And by that, I think he means, even though it doesn't say it, I think he means the divine Torah that wasn't given, the divine truth that human beings haven't filtered through their own minds. There's no such thing as a full truth. And the last line, The human being cannot grasp such a thing with complete perfection. Everything we have on earth, no matter who taught it to you, no matter how much time you took to learn it, no matter how many years you sat and thought, everything we have is tentative. Everything is just night compared to the day that should and must come tomorrow. Anyone again want to ask or comment or object?
I'd like to share something that I don't know where I learned this, but it has to do with thinking of our knowledge as something that lies within a sphere. So imagine that everything we know lies within this sphere, and everything we don't know lies outside the sphere. Then the question is, what is the surface of that sphere? What does it represent? It represents our knowledge of what we don't know. So as we grow and learn more and more and more, this sphere gets larger and larger.
Yeah.
But so does the surface. So we become more and more aware of what we don't know.
Yeah. Thank you.
Rabbi, I had a question. I don't know if this may take us too far away. Just out of curiosity, there's psol and pesel, but there's also pasul. And I'm wondering if anybody's played with that in this context.
I don't know, but it reminds me of something that I do know, which is that I once had a thought that if you look at those 3 Hebrew letters for Peshel, Sol, Pei, Samech Lamed, in English, the word they would make is fossil, fossil. Fei, Samech Lamed in English could be read as fossil, those same 3 consonants. And that's exactly what our author is saying, that a pestle is a fossil. It's something that's fossilized. It doesn't change. It's exactly as it is. And indeed, you've heard, we've all heard people say, don't fossilize religion. Don't make it into something that's of the past, but not of the present. And that's exactly what our author is saying. And I think that's just fascinating. I'm not making any type of historical etymological claim here. I'm just saying it's really interesting that there's a connection between the Hebrew and the English.
Esoteric, but very interesting.
Okay, so I'll just take 1 minute to point out that I assume many of you are understanding now why this text is so important, in my opinion, to the work we do in Roots. Because in Roots, we meet the other, we meet the enemy, we meet those that we've been taught are invisible or are wrong or don't exist or are dangerous or are terrorist or are primitive or bloodthirsty. And if we think that our identity, our narrative, our understanding of ourselves and of history and of the other side is the only truth, then when we meet the other side, we will just write them off. We won't listen. We will come up with a cognitive block that prevents us from hearing anything. In order to hear the other, when his worldview, his whole gestalt is so different from yours, you have to be able to understand that as true as your truth is, it's not the full truth. There may be something else, there may be something in addition. It doesn't mean that you're wrong, but also doesn't mean that he's necessarily wrong.
There's a verse that I like in the Quran. Why did God create people so different? So that they might learn from each other.
Thank you, Morris. In Roots, we quote that verse from the Quran every day. Thank you for bringing it up. Yeah. So I'm going to skip a few paragraphs two paragraphs actually, and go to the last paragraph of the text we're studying. I hope you can see it, but I'm not sure you can. And what it says is, quote, "This is exactly what the Holy Zohar says on the verse, 'Don't make for yourself an idol or any image,' unquote. Idol refers to positive commandments and image refers to negative commandments, for nothing has been revealed to man in its entirety." So our author is looking at this verse, a new verse, one we haven't seen until now, that says, don't make for yourself an idol or an image. And he's asking himself, why say the same thing twice? Idol, image is the same thing. Why say don't make an idol and don't make an image? It's enough to say this or to say that. And his answer is, it comes to tell you, I mean everything. Idol refers to positive commandments, image refers to negative commandments. In other words, the whole Torah, in the legalistic jargon of Jewish law, is divided into positive and negative commandments. That's the whole thing. Don't make yourself an idol means don't make the positive commandments into an idol. Don't make an image, that means don't make the negative commandments into an idol. And again, what does an idol mean? Something that doesn't change, something cut and dry, something chiseled into form, something that you know exactly you can put in your back pocket, take it out tomorrow, it won't change. Don't turn anything into the Torah, into that pestle, that idol, for nothing has been revealed to man in its entirety. So every single understanding you have of anything is tentative. Of course, that doesn't mean that you should belittle what you know. Doesn't mean you should ignore it. Doesn't mean that you should put it aside. It's what we have now. It's all we have. You have to live your life according to your truth. But you also have to be open to knowing that truth may change or expand tomorrow. Okay. Now we're going to go on to another source by our same author, another comment on a different verse in the Torah. This time we're in the book of Genesis. Until now we're in the book of Exodus. We're in the Genesis and we're looking at Jacob, Yaakov, Jacob the Patriarch. He impersonated his brother Esav, dressed up as if he was his brother, went into his father, told his father, I'm Esav, and his father blessed him as if he was Esav, so he stole the blessing from his brother. What happens afterwards is he's caught, and his brother says, I'm going to kill you. He doesn't say it directly to him. His brother says, I'm going to kill Jacob, and Jacob flees for his life. He doesn't know where he's going. He's going to Mesopotamia, someplace to his wife's family. Doesn't know what will happen to him. Everything is uncertain. He's frightened. He's hungry. He's cold. He's forlorn. And he puts down his head on a rock to go to sleep as he's fleeing. And he has a divine vision, the vision of the ladder. And in this divine vision, among other things, God says, and behold, I am with you. Behold, I am with you. And it just so happens that when God says, behold, I am with you, God uses for the word I, Anochi. Not the word Ani, but rather the word Anochi, with the letter Chaf. Remember that from 5 and 10 and 15 minutes ago? Let's read one sentence now. What our author says about that verse, behold, I am with you. Our author says, it does not say Ani, for the letter Chaf is indicative of the source of life without end, as it says in Sefer Yetzirah. Sefer Yetzirah is an ancient book of Jewish mysticism. Now, were we to begin our presentation right now, and we hadn't studied what our author says about the book of Exodus, about the 10 Commandments earlier, just read this that says that the letter Chaf is indicative of the source of life without end. You don't say, what's going on? How could one little letter be the source of life without end? But now that we've read and learned everything he says on that letter in the book of Exodus and the 10 Commandments, we can understand. The source of life without end is letter Chaf. In other words, the uncertainty principle is the source of life without end. Because when you know that you don't know, when you're uncertain, when you know that you have to search more and more, when you know that life is dynamic, when you know that you don't have the truth in your back pocket, That's the source of life without end. When you're searching, that's when you're living to its fullest, says our author. But were you to think that you have the truth, for our author, that's the end of life. That's death. The uncertainty principle, symbolized by the Chaf, is the source of life without end. That, I think, is fantastic. That's powerful. And I will just add in the context of roots. For us, the uncertainty principle means that I'm always certain that I don't have all the truth. I'm always certain that there's something to learn from those people who are most different than me, most opposed to me, that my neighbors in my society say are my enemies. From them, there's something to learn. And of course, that makes life difficult. The uncertainty principle is the source of life without end. It makes life dynamic, it makes life interesting, it makes life exciting, but also makes life difficult. Because it certainly is easier to be an idolater. In the understanding of our author, an idolater is someone who just has all the truth in his back pocket, or so he thinks, and he lives within a certain framework that is very, very clear and never changes, it's never porous, it's never doubtful. But that, for our author, that's death. And I would actually say, and here I'm going out on a limb, that that's literally death. Because here in the Holy Land, in Israel, Palestine, it's those people who think they have all the truth. The other side is illegitimate and is an imposter and is not real and are just terrorists. That's the type of thinking that, as far as I can see, does literally create death. Creates conflict. It creates what I call the hubris of exclusivity. And it creates the sense of a zero-sum game in which what I have to do is to defeat the other side. But if you live with the Chaf, you have to listen to the other side. Okay, let's read on.
Rav,
Yes.
is the Chaf unique only to Jews?
I don't know what our author would say. I would say no.
Because my mind went right to Christianity, where they have all the answers are in Jesus.
Well, look, a lot of Jews think they have all the answers also. Don't blame just the Christians
Well,
for certainty.
that's a genetic disorder, though.
That's not unique to Jews or Christians or Muslims.
Right.
Or
Okay,
people
thank
who are
you.
neither, right? But, you know, in response to what Gilda just said, I will say that I have to admit, and we have to admit, that the things we're saying, even though they're written here in a Jewish source, are certainly not accepted by the majority of Jews, Christians, or Muslims. Most people, as far as I can see, certainly people who call themselves religious, believe in certainty, believe that you have to be certain. You have to be sure that you have the whole truth, the only truth, and nothing but the truth, and the others are wrong. Everyone else is wrong. And so what we're saying here in a sociological context is radical and unpopular, in addition to being difficult. So going back to the text, I'm going to read the next paragraph or part of it. Remember, the context is Jacob, Yaakov, fleeing from his brother. He puts his head down on a rock at night in the middle of nowhere and dreams a dream of God. And God says, behold, I will be with you, with the letter Chaf. I with the letter Chaf. So I'm going to read. The Holy One, blessed be he, showed Jacob, then all the refinements through which he would have to suffer and be refined. What that means is that God showed him, according to our author, all of the trials and tribulations that would make him a better person, all the refinements that he'd have to suffer and be refined. You can call it the blessings of a skinned knee, that only when you try and fail and encounter difficulties and have to overcome them, that's the way you grow. That's the way you build yourself. That's the way you develop. You get everything on a silver platter, then it's not really yours. You haven't acquired it. And you're probably missing something. Let me point out that what we just did in the sentence I read is we passed from the realm of the spiritual and intellectual to the realm of the experiential. Until now, we talked about living with doubt spiritually, intellectually. We talked about not having all the truth spiritually, intellectually. But now he's saying not having all the truth experientially. In other words, not having just an easy, good life. That's also a type of uncertainty, a type of lack. It's not just that you're supposed to live with a chaf in the spiritual, intellectual sense, you also live with a chaf in the experiential sense, that sometimes you don't feel God's presence. You don't feel everything's going good. You suffer. There's disease. There's poverty. There's all type of things that may happen to you. Your brother may be running after you to kill you. Life is difficult. And according to our author, when God said to Jacob, behold, I am with you, what he meant is, I'm going to make life difficult for you. Understand what I'm saying? God showed him the refinements, the difficulties. That's under the rubric of behold, I am with you. Because how is God with him? God is with him with a letter chaf. Because God is kind of with him, almost with him, approximately with him. How is God with you in this sense? In the sense that he lets you fail. He lets you suffer. That's to be really with you. Because that's the way that makes you into a better person. In other words, in a certain paradoxical sense, God is with you when he's not with you. And if God is too much with you, then he's really not doing you a favor. When he's too much with you, he's not with you at all. Because if your parent never lets you learn, never takes his or her hand off the bicycle as you're learning bicycle riding, you'll never learn. You'll never grow. The parent has to let you go a little bit, has to let you fall. God is the parent, and God is telling Jacob, I'll be with you. And what God means is, I will let you suffer. I will let you feel the trials and tribulations. Another line in our author, through all of them, through all the trials and tribulations, he promised him, God promised him, quote, I will watch over you through all your journeys. I will return you to this land, end quote. Return you is the language used concerning a lost object. In other words, our author is saying that God is making Jacob into a lost object. God is making Jacob lose himself. God is helping Jacob to lose himself. Why is it good to lose yourself? I'll give it away. Why is it good to lose yourself? So I always say it like this. Some people have iPhones, some people have Android. If you have an iPhone, I'm going to use the iPhone analogy. The greatest pleasure in life is finding your iPhone. The catch is, in order to find it, you have to lose it. And if you never lost your iPhone, you'll never have the pleasure of finding your iPhone. So in the passage we're learning, it's the same thing in life. The greatest pleasure in life, the greatest fulfillment is finding yourself. The problem is, the hitch is, you have to lose yourself in order to find yourself. So God lets Jacob lose himself so he can find himself. God is doing him a favor by letting him lose himself, by letting him suffer. So now let's read on, we'll read a little bit we just read and read more. Return you, when God says, I'll return you to this land, is the language used concerning a lost object. For, quote, no one can truly understand words of Torah without first having stumbled in them. End quote from the Babylonian Talmud. So the Talmud says that if you study something, it could be Talmud, it could be mathematics, and the first time you read it, you feel you got it. That's simple. Let's go on to something else. It could be you didn't get it. You didn't see the complexity of it. How do you really get the complexity of something? You learn it and you say, I don't understand anything. That's not clear. It's giving me a headache. You go back to the half hour You understand a little bit. Half hour later, you said what you understood, you really didn't understand, it was wrong. And you go back trial and error again and again and again until after a long, long process of stumbling over the words, you finally get to some understanding that tentatively looks good. So the Talmud says you never truly understand words of Torah without having first stumbled in them. And our author here is using that statement about the intellectual world to explain something about the experiential world. It's the same thing in life. Just like you don't really know something until you've stumbled over it and then learned it a million times and finally got to some tentative understanding, the same thing in life. If everything comes in a silver platter, there's no trials and tribulations, then it hasn't really been made yours. That's about the iPhone again. You have to lose the iPhone to find it. You have to lose yourself to find yourself. You have to go through some type of process with difficulty. And that's why the way God is with Jacob is by letting him fall off his bicycle again and again until when he finally learns to ride, he's done it himself and it's his, it's fully his. I'm going to read a little bit more. That is to say that it is by way of the stumbling block that presents itself to a person that the words of Torah enter into his heart with greater desire than otherwise. It's real, it's more yours, it's more acquired. And this is what it means when it says, I will return you, which is a language of repentance. Return you, the word that's used in Hebrew for return, is indeed the word used for finding a lost object, returning an object, but it's also the word for repentance, shuvah, lashuv. To return something to as a lost object, the same word is to return to yourself. Repentance means to turn to yourself. So what's going on here? There's a statement in Talmud that says that someone who sinned and rectified his sin is on a higher level than someone who never sinned. And it's the same thing about the iPhone. It's the same thing about stumbling about mathematics or Torah or anything, that you have to fall in order to get up. If you never fell, you can't get up. If you never fail, you're always static at the same place. Things don't really become yours, you don't acquire them. But if you get lost, if you're uncertain intellectually, if you're physically tried, and then you take hold of yourself, then you recover, then you understand, then you learn, then you improve your life, that's a much higher, deeper, textured life than the life of a straight line that's always static. So again, you have to know that you don't know. You have to lose your iPhone. You have to fall off the bicycle. You have to be lost, fleeing from your brother who's trying to kill you. Things have to be hard. You have to be uncertain. There has to be a path of up and down, of day and night, in order, according to our author at least, for there to be real meaning. Remember, it's all about the source of life without end. That's vitality. It's all in letter Chaf, about the uncertainty and the process. And again, for me, that's at the essence of the work we do in Roots, of interfaith dialogue, of meeting the other, of hearing difficult things and being shattered by them, and then trying to assimilate them into a worldview that's larger than one that I had yesterday and the day before. That's the process. Perhaps a minute for, again, questions, comments, objections.
Potty break?
I don't
Potty break? Rob, nothing changes. Can you hear me?
Nothing changes here because we're trying to say for the past hour that everything should change.
No. I mean, I'm always the one that's reminding you it's time for a potty break. Okay, I'll see you in a minute.
We're going to look at another source. This one is from the same writer, the same speaker, Rabbi Mordechai Liner. And he is commenting on a verse in the book of Genesis, concerning Abraham. And at the very beginning of the 12th chapter of Genesis, what we call Parshat Lech Lecha, God says to Abraham, go forth from your father's land, from your country, from your homeland to land that I will show you, that I will show you. And our author, Rabbi Mordechai Liner, sees some great meaning in the fact that God doesn't tell him where to go, but just tells him, go in that direction, the place I will show you, with an undefined destination. So I'm reading now. For Avram Avinu, in English, Abraham the Patriarch, peace be upon him, was great in his desire to experience the place of his clinging to life in the presence of God, may he be blessed, to the greatest degree possible. And God, may he be blessed, told him to the land which I shall show you. That means that his clinging to God would be in the place called which I shall show you, for it has no boundaries. At all times, the illuminations of the infinite blessed one will be expanding for you more and more. And this you will find in the land of Israel. So here's the same theme again, no boundaries. Expanding. It's not cut and dried. So for our author, when God says to Abraham, go to land that I will show you, God is saying the same thing that we've been talking about for the past hour. He's telling him, go on a journey. You don't know exactly when you get there and what it is. It has no boundaries. It's always expanding. And it's really fascinating that for our author, the land of Israel symbolizes the unbounded, the unknown, the always expanding, the place without boundaries. I say that's so ironic because in today's politics, it's always about boundaries. It's always about borders. Where is Israel? Where is Palestine? And we have, but for the author that we're learning, the Meshiloach, there are no boundaries. It just goes on and on. Okay, another source. I'm looking at the clock. We're going to take 23 more minutes. This source is from our same author. And it's again about Jacob, like we looked at 5 and 10 minutes ago. This is after Jacob has been in Mesopotamia for 20 years. He's been with his father-in-law. With his mother's family. He got married there. He was with his father-in-law. He now has 2 wives or 4 wives, depending on how you look at it, and lots of sheep, lots of possessions. He's coming back to the land of Israel, where lives the brother that wanted to kill him 20 years ago. And the verse says in the Torah, and Jacob sent messengers before him. He sent messengers, according to the context, to Esav, his brother, the brother that wanted to kill him. And the question you can ask is, why did he send messengers to the brother who wants to kill him? He should have come in under the radar, trying to avoid his brother. Why did he tell his brother, here I am? It's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. So I'm reading our text. Jacob sent messengers before him. We find the following in the Midrash, in Jewish homiletical literature. He is there, in other words, Esav, minding his own business, and you go and send messengers to him? Why did he have to send messengers? So we're not going to read everything that our author has to write. I'm just going to look at the last few lines of this paragraph. And the last few lines say as follows. Therefore, even though Jacob understood that he would suffer from Esav, his brother wants to kill him, he also understood that unbounded, positive things would grow from this matter in the longer run, and that is why he was unable to refrain from sending to him. So what's going on here? As you've seen, a lot of what our author says is symbolic, it's metaphorical, it's going far beyond the verse of the Torah to hint to a deeper lesson in life. It seems to me what he's saying is that the only way to acquire deep intellectual, spiritual, existential victories and accomplishments is to take risks. Take risks. Jacob took the risk of encountering his brother, even though it could have cost him his life, because he knew the only way to accomplish, to attain, to acquire anything meaningful in life is to put yourself in a risky situation. And as far as I understand, this is a spiritual message from our author. He's not trying to tell us what happened in Jewish history 3,000 years ago. He's trying to tell us how to live today. And he's saying that you have to go out of your comfort zone. You have to go to places and talk to people and be in situations that make you uncomfortable, that make you feel out of place. Perhaps not physical danger, but spiritual danger, intellectual danger. Talking to people who you think are crazy, who have very, very strange, perverted, and dangerous opinions. You have to talk to them. And you put yourself in the risk, which means to listen to them. And it's hard, it's dangerous, but you know that unbounded positive things will grow from this matter in the longer run. So you could say that our author recommends living dangerously. And in a certain sense, everything we've talked about for the past hour and 10 minutes is about living dangerously, living with doubt, living with an openness to new opinions, new understandings, new insights, new illumination. That means a living without stability. It means a dynamic life, not a static life. But again, for our author, the dynamic life, the life of vitality, is the source of life without end, as we saw that phrase earlier. And again, for our work in roots, it's certainly dangerous, and I don't mean physical danger. I mean the danger of learning that everything you thought to be the whole truth is only part of the truth. It's really, really dangerous for a Palestinian nationalist to meet me, who represents Zionism. For him, that's something evil and something threatening. It's really dangerous because he has to come face to face with the fact that there might be some truth in what I think and what I believe and the way I live. And it's equally dangerous for me to meet a Palestinian nationalist, Palestinians who have spent time in Israeli jail, Palestinians who are considered to be enemies of Israel. It's dangerous for me to listen because I'm confronted by a worldview that's not what I thought to be true. And that is, it's shattering. It's often made me nauseous to have to listen and to feel undermined and attacked by his or her very identity. That's really living dangerously. But as far as I'm concerned, unbounded positive things can come from that when we expand our worldviews to understand that, yes, I'm right, but there may be some very deep, legitimate understandings on the other side as well. Okay, we're gonna close in another 14 minutes. We have one more source. And this source is not the same author, not the Mei Shiloach, not Rabbi Mordechai Liner. It's the Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet is Rabbi Yehuda Leib Alter of Ger. He is one of the founding fathers of the Gera Hasidim, the Gera Hasids. What we're reading was written, as you can see, the year 5655. Which was just about 120 years ago, just about the turn of the 20th century, again in the town of Ger, or some pronounce it Gur. And it's again Hasidic writing, which is very suggestive, very metaphorical, symbolic. We'll read the first paragraph. The Midrash quotes the verse, "Death and life are in the hands of the tongue," from Proverbs. It goes on to quote Ben Sira, who told of one who found a glowing ember and blew upon it, lighting up a flame. Then he spat on it and it was extinguished. So we all probably know that Proverbs is one of the books of the Hebrew Bible. But on the other hand, many of you probably have not heard of the Book of Ben Sira. Ben Sira today is not part of the Hebrew Bible, but it once was. At least some rabbis 2,000 years ago considered Ben Sira to be one of the books of the canon. And in this verse in Ben Sira is a parable that's meant to explain that verse in the book of Proverbs. So again, the book of Proverbs says, Mavet v'chayim biyad halashon, death and life are in the hands of the tongue. And Ben Sira, the book of Ben Sira, gives a metaphor, a parable to explain that verse. A glowing ember, you blow upon it, lighting up a flame. You spit on the ember, it's extinguished. That's the explanation of the verse in the book of Proverbs. Well, I can pretty much figure out what it means. It means that when I spit on the ember, that's death. It's in the hands of the tongue. I'm bringing death to the ember by spitting on it. That I understand. And life is in the hands of the tongue. That's when I bring light to the ember by not spitting on it, but rather by blowing on it gently to fan a flame. Okay, good. So what's it teaching me? So now our author, Rabbi Yehuda Leib Alter Ger, explains in the next paragraph. This ember is to be found everywhere. It is the spark of Torah, which is called fire. The word ember in Hebrew gachelet is numerically equivalent to the word truth, emet. Truth refers to Torah, by which everything was created. Thus, the ember is to be found everywhere in anything, in everything. So this is based on gematria, which is giving numerical value to each of the letters. Emet and gechelet have the same numerical equivalent, truth and spark. But that doesn't matter. First, we don't have to go through the numerology here to understand what he's saying. He's saying that the ember we were talking about, when we said that if you blow on the ember, you bring life, and if you spit on it, you bring death, that ember is Torah. That ember is truth. Truth and Torah for our author are the same thing. And he reminds us that the world was created through the Torah. He's basing himself on a parable, on a midrash that says that the Torah is the blueprint through which the world was created. And just like you can say that in every house, every apartment building, every institution that's built, the blueprint is there. The blueprint is manifest by the building. In the same sense, there's Torah in the whole world. The Torah is the blueprint for the world, so the whole world is the Torah. So he's telling us the world is Torah, which means the world is truth. So now, look at the next line. The Jew is capable of fulfilling the potential of this spark. What that means is that you should go around the world and understand that the world is full of sparks of truth, divine truth. The world is full of Torah. Everywhere you go, every supermarket, every drugstore, every school, every house of worship, full of truth. And that truth is in the form of sparks, of embers. And you have a choice. You can approach one of those embers and spit at it, and then it goes out and it's gone. Or you can approach those same embers, those same sparks, and blow on them gently and fan a flame, and then you have something that warms you and illumines you. So the Jew is capable of filling the potential of the spark, and I would say that every human being is capable of filling this spark. So if you're a Democrat, you have to know that there are sparks of truth among the Republicans. And if you're a Republican, you have to know that there are sparks of truth among the Democrats. If you're a liberal, a conservative, a black, or a white, you're a Jew, a Christian, or a Muslim, you always encounter the other. And there's sparks there. There's sparks of Torah, sparks of truth. And of course, we all know that our tendency is to want to spit at those sparks. And spit at them means don't listen. Or if you do listen, to ridicule, let it go in one ear and out the other. to argue and prove that they're wrong. According to our author, that's called spitting at the sparks of Torah, and then they go out. Our author suggests that the better way is to blow on the sparks gently, which means to listen. It doesn't mean you have to accept everything you hear, but you listen. You listen till it hurts. You listen until you feel your whole identity is being challenged. You listen as if you feel one more second, I'm going to listen, it's going to drive me crazy, and then you keep listening. And then you try to find a way to find something of value, something of truth, something of significance, something that can add to your life in the words you just heard. You massage them. And that's what's called life is in the hands of the tongue. If you spit at the spark, if you don't listen, that is the fulfillment of death is in the hands of the tongue. So it's really hard. It's really, really hard, and everyone knows that's really hard. We're going to read on. He says, of this it is written, he blew the breath of life into his nostrils, and man became a living soul. That's the second creation story in Genesis. God blew into the nostrils of the clay form that he created, and man became a living soul through God's breath, through God's tongue, if you will, to use the metaphor. And then our author goes on to say that living soul, man became a living soul, is rendered by the Aramaic translation of the Torah, the Aramaic translation of the Torah as a speaking spirit. What is a living soul? It's a speaking spirit. We have the power in our mouths to awaken the life that lies everywhere. In other words, according to our author, God breathed into the first man he created, and that man became a living soul. God gave life by breathing. And man, as a living soul, is a speaking spirit. What the author is trying to say is that all of us can be like God by using our mouth, our breath, our speech to listen, to absorb more and more sparks of truth. Not to blow them out, not to spit at them, but to use our breath to ignite them, which means to listen, to ask questions, to ask good questions, charitable questions, not to nullify or disparage, but to listen well. That's the way you create life like God created life, by attributing some value, some truth, some legitimacy to everything you hear. Again, I said some, not complete. By absorbing that spark that seems so foreign and bad and wrong, by absorbing some of it into your worldview, by expanding it, by massaging it, that's the way you follow in God's footsteps, and you bring more life to the world, according to our author. In the last sentence he says, last two sentences, this is why if you walk in my ways is read as working in Torah. There's a verse in the book of Leviticus that says, if you walk in my ways, God will give you blessing. And the traditional interpretation says to walk in God's ways means to work in Torah, to toil in Torah. Now, traditionally, it's understood that to toil in Torah means to sit with the book and sweat and try to understand and break your teeth and argue over it and make a great effort to understand the words of Torah, the words of Talmud, the words of philosophy, the words of Jewish law. But our author says now, there's another way of toiling in Torah, of working in Torah. What's the other way of doing it? Not just sitting in the study hall and poring over books, but rather this means making a real effort to find words of Torah everywhere, to seek out the stamp and imprint of Torah that's found in every place. So there's deep toil, there's difficulty in going into, I don't know, a Republican club if you're a Democrat, or a Democratic club if you're a Republican, if you're a Jew going into a mosque, or if you're a Muslim going into a church, or if you're a Reformed Jew going into an Orthodox shul, or an Orthodox Jew going into a Reconstructionist. That's the effort to find Torah everywhere. And it's hard. And again, your normal response is to spit and to denigrate and not to listen, to ridicule. And it's hard. He calls it toiling in Torah. And that's why I call one of my Palestinian partners, I call him my rabbi. He's my source of Torah. He challenged me. He made life difficult for me. He presented to me very different understandings of him and of me and of the world and the reality we live in. And it's really hard to listen. And it doesn't mean that you have to accept everything you hear. You shouldn't accept everything you hear. You have to test it. But you can, I believe, find some spark of divinity everywhere to a greater or lesser extent. And that's what brings life to the world, according to this author. And you can certainly see how the text we just learned by Rabbi Yuda Leib Alter of Ger fits into the other things we learned by the Mei Shiloach, Rav Mordechai Liner, and provides us with a worldview of search, of listening, of exploration, of uncertainty, of taking spiritual, intellectual risks to expand your horizons and be challenged, of not knowing what illumination you will come to tomorrow and what illumination will come to the day after tomorrow. It means a dynamicism and not living statically. And I think that this is a, for me, just for me, it's a model of how to make the world a better place. The clock says we have 2 more minutes.
Rav,
Gilda.
when are you going to teach again? The information sheet you sent us only shows today. You're scheduled to teach today. When will you be teaching again?
Every Sunday at the same time, I'm either teaching like tonight, or I'm hosting a guest or more than one guest, presenting a worldview that is challenging in the framework of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Before you're able to join us, I said next week we're having a Jewish female rabbi who's a close friend of mine and a Christian Catholic priest talk about the interfaith dialogue group that I found in the framework of Roots, and that they're part of the past 4 or 5 years, and how they've been challenged, very challenged by the meeting of the other and the unbelievably powerful discussions we've had. And other weeks we have a little bit of politics, again, me teaching, we have Palestinian speaking, we have Israeli speaking, we have, 1 week we have a Christian pastor who helped us to found Roots 6 years ago, speaking about his journey. So all of the presentations are on the Roots website. And also I'll try and put up all of you on the mailing list who are not there already to get the information. Of course, you can always write to me. My email address is ravhanan at gmail.com, ravhanan, RAVHANAN at gmail.com. And of course, as you know very well, like many NGOs, Roots is in very, very serious financial difficulties at this time. About 50% of our income has disappeared because it was based on either me going to the States or guests from America and around the world coming to Israel, Palestine to meet the Roots activists. We need and cherish your support. I want to see if there's anyone who'd like to ask a question. Of course, anyone who's, you don't need me to hear that if you want to leave, you can leave. But I certainly want to make myself open to facilitating discussion.
I would like to ask a question.
Yeah.
How much conversation do you have with the Hasidim within Israel itself? Do you make this sort of it's almost a sense, it feels to me like it would be more difficult to make this sort of interpretation with them than with, say, your more Reformed Jews or others.
So I hear two things in what you're saying. I'm not sure which one you mean. One is that it would be easier for Reform Jews to accept this interpretation, or do you mean it'd be easier for me to meet Reform Jews and have a conversation than to meet Haredi Jews?
I guess I was focusing more on the Haredim.
So to tell you the truth, I talk today more to Palestinians than I do to Haredi Jews. But
That does not surprise me.
Okay, but it means that just like everyone else, I have a lot of boundaries that I also have to go beyond.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm a retired Christian pastor, but boy, I sure could have profited or learned from this kind of close exploration of the Torah. We didn't get this kind of emphasis on Torah, much more on, of course, the so-called New Testament, the Christian Testament, the Christian Bible. But it would make sense to me that what one learns, regardless which compartment one falls in, there is truth to be found, and there is much to be learned from that which is held as the other.
Rabbi, what about the guardians of the gate? Are they willing to be involved at all in this?
You mean the Torah Karta?
Well, the ones we call the Satmar.
I assume not, but
because I've heard in the past that they've had meetings with the Palestinians because they oppose the
I see
concept
what
of
you're
the
talking
state.
about.
Oh,
Yeah.
only to fight against the Jews. That was their meeting. It was not a meeting to get educated. They don't accept the statehood of Israel.
So in a certain sense, you could say that the Satmar are my other, right? They're my my challenge to try and to see the spark of truth in their approach as well. And by the way, I do see the spark of truth in their approach, but that's another story.
Well, yes.
Okay, I don't see anyone.
Rob, will
Yeah.
we find you? Will we find you next week on the same website you sent me today?
The same link? No, there's another link, and write me an email and I'll send it to you.
Okay, that's what gets me in trouble. It took me 20 minutes and I panicked. Okay, thank you. And
Okay.
thank you. Excellent.
Wait, Andrew wants to say something?
Gilda, I will point out that if you send Roots a sizable donation, then he'll automatically send you the necessary information for each class, and you have to keep asking for it.
You wouldn't believe how far afield I got today trying to find what I
would.
yeah, it's I'm ashamed of how I managed to get so lost, but
Andrew, did you want to say something? Or was I wrong?
Do you have time for another question, or is it too late?
Yeah, everyone else can leave if they want, so we're not holding anyone up.
we're hanging with you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, I thought this was fascinating. I really appreciate the chance to listen to you share about these texts. This is really interesting. So, and I have a question, and I'm not going to be able to phrase this very well, but I'll try, and then you can respond as you wish. So, I mean, a lot of these texts, and I think especially the one that starts for Abraham Avinu that you cited, they almost seem to suggest that what's most important is not the specific piece of land that Abraham was going to, but rather just the act of going to somewhere that God would show him later. And that it was more about the discovery of something unknown and trusting God and clinging to him no matter what happens than it is about a specific piece of land. And I was just wondering, is it hard for you to reconcile that with your Zionism at all, or does that coexist somehow? If there's anything you can say about that, I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say.
So what I'd say has to do with the methodology of learning this type of text, this type of Hasidic suggestive text. As far as I understand, the author is not nullifying the simple, straightforward physical meaning of the text. He's saying that's one thing, the historical story is one thing, but I want to teach you a spiritual message based upon the text. A spiritual message, I said at the beginning, which really has nothing to do with the text. It's just using text as a suggestion, as a jumping off point to say his own thoughts. So from my perspective, on the one hand, there's the physical land. On the other hand, there's the spiritual messages that we learned in our study today. There's not necessarily any interaction or any contradiction between those two things, the physical land on the one hand and the philosophy of life we talked about today. There's no necessary contradiction or tension between them, but there could be a potential tension between them. I kind of hinted at one point that I do think that many of us Jews do, in a certain sense, make the land of Israel into an idol. When it becomes the be-all and the end-all, when it becomes the ultimate value and is seen as overriding other values of justice, values of equality, then I think we've run into a problem. And that's the problem that, among other problems, Roots is trying to overcome.
Rabbi, I have a question. I hear what you're saying and I agree with everything you're saying, but then there's some groups that I cannot see a spark in. You know, if I think of the Nazis or any extremist groups and the Klan, I'm not sure you can have a dialogue or see sparks. And is there a time when the boundaries reach a brick wall, or is it always expanding?
Yeah, thank you for that. So I run up against a paradox when I try and answer your question. And the paradox is this, that like you, I experience the sense that there are some people or ideologies that I have nothing to learn from. On the other hand, I know the minute I legitimize that sense that there's someone or something I have nothing to learn from, then I pulled the carpet out from under everything we learned tonight. Because what I've done is that I've opened up the door to always saying, oh, that's the one that I can't listen to. And I'll use that rationale to prevent me from having contact with anyone and everything. It's a slippery slope. The minute I open the door to answering yes to your question, there is a limit, then I completely pulled the carpet out from everything we said today.
Okay.
So
Rabbi?
wait a second. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a paradox. It means that we always have to make every effort not to fool ourselves and make every effort not to say that this is the one person that I have nothing to learn from. We have to always make the effort. Even though there may be certain cases in which we'll fail, which will say, in this case, I can't. But that could never be my first option.
Okay.
Rabbi, can you learn from someone, I'm just going to say a white supremacist group? There's lots of them here in the United States. Can I look at them and learn from what they're doing wrong? And so therefore I'm still getting some truth from them. Am I explaining that very well?
Yeah. Look, I understand what you're saying, of course, and I identify with what you're saying. But still, the effort has to be more than that. The effort has to see a spark of goodness, a spark of truth, and I think that it's possible. Again, I'm not doing the work right at this moment of trying to find that spark, but just superficially, I can say that there are values of tradition and of loyalty that I think that one could learn from some of them, for example. And there's certainly there an honest, sometimes effort and desire to defend values against those we think may undermine them. We can find positive motivation. In other words, if we can't find positive content, we can find positive motivation.
Whew.
Okay.
Thank you, Rob.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Always.
Okay.
Later.
I'll say
Back
good
next
afternoon to you
week.
guys and good night to me.
Bye. Have a good week.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye, everyone.
Right.
Okay, how do I turn this off?